Now, to my right, you see that Steve Smith is no longer with us, and instead we have Molly Sheridan. Welcome to the broadcast. Molly Sheridan is a music editor, writer, and producer, works at New Music USA. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm usually on the other side of the camera, so this is a real treat. I guess we're about to find out whether there's a good reason they normally keep me on the back. But Steve was actually a great mentor to me as a journalist, so there's actually something a little bit poetic about getting to keep his chair warm just for a little while.
So you are filling in because coming up shortly, in NC, Steve and I will be taking the stage to join the ensemble, and we need someone to keep the chair warm.
Things going.
So, what did you think of the William Walton Facade concert?
Kind of what I love about this whole festival is that you're taking these moments, sort of stretching them in different directions, unexpected directions. Like I wasn't expecting to have so much fun in this piece this morning, or Zorn stretching our ears out a little bit one way or another.
Right.
And I get a lot out of that. Also, of course, I knew about Barbara Hannigan's work before I got to the festival, but I had never had the opportunity to see her conduct live.
Right.
And what an example! It's so engaging to me, and it's so natural. Like you see the conductor always moving. But that really draws you in, or draws me in a really special way. And I see now why people really stare at the conductor through performances.
Right, and I found myself in that piece just smiling the whole time. I mean, every single movement was just so much fun, and the costumes everyone was wearing, I guess we'll call them costumes. They weren't costumes.
Yeah, little hats, boots,
they were like
nice
outfits. It was just really, really a fun experience. And for me, that moment near the end when Barbara turned around to do the last number, that's just fun.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. Now, this piece, Facade, is William Walton wrote it when he was 20 years old, which is kind of scary, actually. And yesterday we heard the Nussin, and the first piece on the Nussin concert, he wrote when he was 17 years old.
Oh, I didn't realize he was that young.
Yes, so it's pretty incredible. We have these young composers creating such amazing work. And William Walton wrote it when he was living in the attic of the poet who wrote the text to it, Edith Sitwell's. He was living in the attic, and the piece was premiered in the Sitwell home in a salon-style concert with Edith Sitwell, the poet, behind a curtain, yelling out the poetry with a megaphone.
Doesn't that just sound like it should be a Broadway show or something? That should not have been someone's real life.
Yeah, and it's really cool that this piece, he wrote it when he was 20, but through his whole life went through many different iterations, including a ballet version with no text, no speakers, including 2 orchestral versions, and then multiple versions with different poems, and they kept adding poems, taking away poems, and today we heard the 1951 version of the piece, which was the final version with all these great speakers on stage, and super fun. So we're about 30 minutes away from part 2 of the afternoon concert, which is Terry Riley's In C. This is a piece you know well, yes?
I know it. I've seen it once live only, but there's definitely been a lot of recordings of it. I feel like after in 2009, it was at Carnegie Hall. I think Kronos started that move to get all these amazing artists on stage simultaneously to do this piece. It was an amazing experience. Then a lot of recordings started coming across my desk, which is what's great about this piece. Anytime you change the people who are performing it, or the timbre of the instruments involved, you're going to get a slightly different experience, which is what makes even today so exciting. We have no idea what's about to happen.
Right. So the piece is built on 53 individual cells of music, and the instrumentation, like you mentioned, is open, meaning, I guess hypothetically, one person could do it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be maybe the most enthralling performance, but one person could do it. And today we're going to have on stage over 60 performers doing it. And with these one single 53 cells, the performers make their way through the cells and repeat them ad libitum as many times as they'd like to, and moving through the piece kind of together, creating micro cannons and micro kind of like counterpoint all the way through the piece. And a performance can be as short as, I guess, 20 minutes. And I guess as long as you actually want to go for it, But Steve Schick did say don't go over no more than 2 hours today.
I got to read the room a little bit on that one, I think. And also, I think a lot of people sort of credit this as where minimalism, this is like the birthplace. I hesitate to always use those pinpoints because there's lots of people working simultaneously.
I will agree though that this was the first rhythmic minimalist piece. Because before that, you had Lamont Young doing these kind of drone pieces, these like hour-long drone pieces, or longer than an hour sometimes. And then you have In C comes along with the rhythm and the pulse, and it's called In C, and there's these C's, like the note C, that's repeated through the entire piece. And you're going to see in the performance, I think Steve Schick is starting in the front on the xylophone with the C pulse. But then I think you're going to watch as different percussionists come forward and take over him over the course of the hour on the pulse. One thing I love about this piece is, I didn't know this till today, the original title was The Global Village for Symphonic Pieces. Now this is a really nice and interesting title because it kind of fits Terry Riley, San Francisco, the 60s, this idea of community, right?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because New Music Box, the magazine that I work for, had the chance to interview him, and he spoke about that time back in 1964 when he was putting the piece together. And he talked about how he started showing it to people, and there was excitement in San Francisco, but it was also confusing as to how exactly this was going to work, how they were going to put it together, what was going to happen. And he kept talking about how he thought it wasn't the piece he thought he was going to compose.
Right.
It came to him as like a vision, and that was the next step in this kind of thinking, that it wasn't just a pattern, it was multiple patterns and how they flew together. And I thought this was just such a lovely image of what this piece really is to think about visually. And if you've never seen the score, that might be helpful too, to see these cells and the musicians are listening and figuring out how many times to repeat a section before moving forward. But it's not just a ramshackle jam session. You really are paying attention to what what your neighbor is doing. So that makes sense for the title, that you'd be working together. And it might sound a little too over the edge in 2019, but at the time it probably sat pretty well.
Absolutely, and as legend goes, Paulina Oliveros and Steve Reich were in the ensemble for the premiere of this piece in San Francisco. And it was Steve Reich's idea to add the pulsing Cs.
Don't you suspect that he was just getting really frustrated in that rehearsal, that no one knew how it was going to work, and he's like, all right, I've got an idea. We got to get this going together. I'm the New Yorker, so I'm going to get this
on time. So then after the 12:15 concert, which is the part 2 of the afternoon, the In C by Terry Riley, we have the 4:30 p.m. concert, our final concert here on the broadcast, Stravinsky's Pulcinella, Haydn Symphony No. 49, La Passion, and Gershwin's, there's on your screen right now, Gershwin's Girl Crazy Suite, arranged by Bill Elliott, who you just saw on stage on the piano. And that's going to have Barbara Hannigan conducting and singing and leading the Ludwig players on stage. And this, to me, is such a fitting and great way to end this festival. I mean, we're going to see Barbara in all her glory at the end, and singing and conducting. That's amazing.
Yeah, a super appropriate way to finish out the festival. I got to see some of the films that have been happening during the festival, which have been great, and a lot of them focused on Barbara and her sort of journey of thinking through, after having what I see as an amazing vocal career. I'm sure she thinks of it that way too, but she didn't phrase it that way. To explore what her next steps were going to be. And I think we've seen a lot of that in this festival with the young artists that she's mentoring, and then this conducting, this turning around and looking at the audience and being like, no, I can do all the things. And she had this really poetic way of talking about how her instrument was breath and how she understood breath. She spent all this time, and she's obviously pretty good at it. So it was actually she realized she could be, that's the thing, she said she realized she could be really good at this after the Rake's progress. After the Rake project.
Yeah, because Anna Trulove was the first role.
thing that she played.
And I think what you mentioned was the Ojai Films. And what's really cool is every year the artistic director, or music director, sorry, Mr. Barbara Hannigan, brings in their take on what they want to do with these outside community events. And last year with Kotcheff, the violinist, she did kids concerts. And this year with Barbara Hannigan, she had this film series, right? And you caught the John Zorn film, you said?
Yeah, I did the John Zorn, and then yesterday was 3 different films focused around Barbara's work in different areas. And it's funny, that's the kind of thing at a summer festival I often think, I don't need to go see the films. I want to hear the music. But one, it gets really exhausting after a number of days. You need to give your ears a sort of shift. Not that you need to miss anything, but just take a moment, or else it's gonna be too much. And the films end up often being the thing that I love so much. It's sort of my business to be talking with artists and to go behind the music, if you will. And I get a lot out of that, but I remember some good advice that someone gave me once when going to a festival, that you really have to then pick what you're doing and then be here now. And that's what I started doing with these films, and I learned so much, and it adds, like the last piece now, I've seen the sort of backstory to the Gershwin and the arrangement and the working on it. So it's primed me to have a really exciting experience.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me personally, and I think probably the viewers at home, and I think everyone here in Libbey Park, I think everyone's just cannot wait to hear Barbara conduct and sing. I know I haven't seen it before live in person, and it just seems like it's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, I think we're in for a real treat.
Also on the evening concert, which we have not mentioned, is the Haydn La Passion and the Stravinsky Pulcinella. Now the Pulcinella, we're hearing it in its entirety, meaning the version with the ballet that includes the singers and the songs, which I've actually never seen live either. I only know the Pulcinella, which is the suite that arranged afterwards. So really cool to hear in its full-formed version.
I know absolutely nothing about it, so now I feel like I'm going to get like the
Yeah,
encyclopedic version
exactly.
right off the bat.
Now, Pulcinella was what launched Stravinsky into neoclassicism. Diaghilev asked him to write this ballet based on Pergolesi music. It turns out it wasn't Pergolesi, it was actually a bunch of composers. They had a bunch of scores. But Stravinsky was like, rewriting someone else's music? I don't know about that. And then he saw the music, like, hey, this is pretty good actually. I think I will rewrite this music. And so we'll call it a remix, like the old school remix, you know? But he just takes these pieces and makes them his own, but also keeps that old, 17th century sentiment to it. And then what you end up with is Stravinsky going, old music's pretty good. And then, which launched him into his phase 2, neoclassicism. And then, of course, that ended with our opening concert piece, The Rake's Progress, which was the last major neoclassical work Stravinsky wrote. So it's really cool, I've been saying this all weekend, that we're bookending the festival with the first and last neoclassical work of Stravinsky.
Okay.
So
Very clever.
You'll get the full breadth. And then La Passion, the Haydn Symphony number 49, is actually the oldest piece I think they're doing this year.
I'm flipping through the program book and I was like, wait a minute, how did Haydn sneak in here?
Every year there's always one or two old pieces that get in the mix, and usually they have some sort of purpose. And oftentimes I don't know what the purpose is until I get here, and I kind of feel it out. And this one I finally learned what it was. The purpose is this is on the next album recorded by Ludwig and Barbara Hannigan.
Well, then we know they're in prime form, because the way to go into a performance in a great way is to have fine-tuned it in that recording studio with the producer being like, no, again, back, one more time.
So we've been talking about all weekend their first album, which won a Grammy, a Juno, and Gramophone Magazine's millionth awards, called Crazy Girl Crazy. Girl Crazy Girl? Crazy Go Crazy, which includes Lulu's Suite by Berg. It includes the Gershwin Girl Crazy Suite, and includes Barrio Sequenza, a specialty of Barbara Hannigan's. And so this follow-up album is going to include the Haydn Symphony number 49, La Passion. So then we have this whole weekend so far. It's been amazing concerts. You've caught a lot of them.
I have.
How many have you caught? Most of them?
Most of them, yeah. I think almost.
So let's start with day one.
Okay.
The Rake's Progress. I love that this festival opens with a bang.
It does, literally. The box is open and we are ready to go.
And Barbara Hannigan spraying smoke on stage. What do you think of that performance and that production?
Well, it's funny because as soon as that box opened, or even I saw the marketing, I'm like, there's a performing arts series on the East Coast, BAM, and it's the same thing where you get so excited just looking at the brochure because you can smell the ink coming off of it and you see like, they're gonna do something different with this performance than, even if I think I know Stravinsky or I think I know this thing, I don't need to see this, that's not gonna be the case. And that was here too, and I loved the idea of approaching this work in this way, that it's a box, you're gonna open it up, you're gonna take it out and take a look at it and see what does it mean to me now. But it is a thing that's old, and she was acknowledging that, everyone performing was, but it's still such a special work. And then of course, like I said, I got to see the documentary where they followed the auditioning of the singers and this process of Barbara going into this project and remembering her early times and also wanting to try and stretch herself to this next stage. So it's a really amazing piece on its own, and then to think of the history with these performers in this setting has been really.
So the performers being the Equilibrium artists who have been a feature of this year's festival, and these are the mentored, I want to say students, mentored young professionals of Barbara Hannigan.
Yeah, I'm super impressed because when you frame it as, oh, she's mentoring these young artists, you think, oh great, this is going to be such a warm and fuzzy experience, but oh no. Every single moment, these artists are killing it. I have not seen one wavering, so. And
what we had in the chair where you're sitting yesterday, we had the tenor, Elgin Lear Thomas, and we had Aphrodite Petaladu in the chair, and they both spoke about the mentorship program, and just kind of really spoke about, it's really Barbara helping them with the mental game, a lot of it, and just how to protect your mind, your body, your voice, and how to navigate, this career of being a touring, traveling singer, which takes its tolls on your body. I mean, think about it. Elgin Lear Thomas he lives in England, and Scotland. He needs to go all the way over here to sing this big, huge role of Tom Rakewell. How do you protect your body and your voice in that travel? And he also spoke about just the general love of Barbara Hannigan. Now, you saw the documentary about the audition process.
I did.
He mentioned that when you walked in the door to audition for Barbara, she gave you a hug.
The interaction was amazing. I was like, if I had ever had an audition like that, maybe I would be a violinist today and here in a very different capacity. But but she wanted to let the artists, they were putting so much into this, she wanted them to walk away with something. And it did change the tenor of everything. It became this human experience where she wanted to give them something, even if they didn't end up being in the show.
Right.
And they had some real talk in those moments, talking about, one girl asked about loneliness, how, she felt very lonely. She's in the practice room by herself all the time. And Barbara was like, she said it more eloquently, which is kind of like tough talk. This is a lot of it. You need to be prepared for this and learn how to manage these things,
right.
or make other choices. She also, in part of the program, has a coach that originally was working with athletic people about how to approach a really tough event, mentally game yourself up. If you're tired, forget you're tired for 2 hours because you're on stage and these crowds are not going to...
I'm tired right now.
Yeah, you need to be on, and you can do it to a certain degree, but also not psyching yourself out and beating yourself up. Aphrodite talked about that, someone else messes up in an audition, you're fine with it, but if you mess up in an audition, you can beat yourself up for so long, it's unfair, and it ruins your game, so just let it go.
Right. And typically the audition process is one where, you walk into a room, there's a table, there's producers, there's directors, there's, conductors. They don't look at you. It's all quiet, know. But Elgin conveyed to me that you get the hug from Barbara, and then afterwards, like you mentioned, there was a discussion.
Yeah, it wasn't
Barbara.
just like, go home, we'll call you in 3 weeks, maybe, good luck,
Yeah, I mean, so she's really showing even from stage one, that she cares for these people, and that's amazing. And I think we're seeing that this weekend with Barbara, the soprano, the conductor, and the mentor, and seeing how she's just helping these young artists grow. So then, day 2, we had Zorn, Schoenberg, and Vivier. That Vivier, I mean, did you see?
Well, again, the singer too, just coming out, Aphrodite, I was like, oh my goodness, to walk away with that. I think everyone's talking about how Ojai brings a little bit of heaven to earth. That's what I was doing the social media takeover on Friday for Ojai, and so I was seeing all the comments coming in, and that was definitely where people were, even on the live stream, were typing in about how much it meant to them to be able to see that kind of performance.
I mean, but that piece is such a special piece, and I made this comment 2 days ago. 5 months ago, when I saw the program release announced, I went, Vivier, Only Child? Yes! I can't wait. It's like a piece that you don't get to hear live very often, and it's such amazing work. And then we had yesterday, which you mentioned, the Nussen, the Zorn Jumelatteret, the folk song concert, and then the Grise. I mean, and this is Barbara pulling out the fireworks.
Totally. And I didn't know, I sort of had expectations for the Zorn after the chamber music, which was phenomenal but distinct. And then the U.S. premiere of that work was such a different box. And it was so moving, so I took a lot away from that, for sure.
And I said to Steve on there, I said about the Zorn, I was like, he can't have written down all those notes, and she cannot have sung them all like that. It doesn't make any sense. It's just, it's too much. But knowing Zorn and knowing her, it was written down exactly right.
Very much so.
And she learned every single one of them and sang them all, and absolutely incredible. So, with the scope of the festival, we're coming to the very last day. What do you make of it all?
I love festivals like this. I work on a virtual platform most of the time. New Music Box is actually celebrating 20 years online this year.
Wow.
So we kind of feel like we grew up with the internet, and that I've watched sort of this transition culturally to this very digital life. So they get the chance to come to a concert even and take the phone away, connect directly with an artist on stage is such, I think, even more special experience in this day and age. And so then a festival really allows you to kind of put it away, really immerse yourself in someone else's creative vision, let them guide you a little bit, introduce you to things you don't know or things you think you know. Like for me, the Steve Schick, I've seen resonant bodies quite a few times at this point, but still, in a gazebo over 3 nights, it becomes a different thing. And so I can take away a lot from that, and I think a lot of people can. I enjoy speaking to the audience members around me. That's a big part of a festival like this for me too, and getting the chance to know their stories and what they're excited about. So I learn as much from them as I do from the people on stage, and it becomes you can go home from the weekend then, and for as exhausted as you are, still be energized by everything that's just happened.
So you mentioned your work with New Music USA. What do you do there?
So I am the director of content and the co-editor of New Music Box, the web magazine that I mentioned. We also have a radio stream, Counterstream, 24/7 music, no talk, no interruptions. We also support adventurous new music through our grant programs. So we get a lot of applications, and we're starting to tell the stories even more complexly with people talking about their projects, the events they have coming up. We do in-depth interviews with artists, so something like this, but where I'd be quizzing you about the entire scope of your performance career, that as well. mini documentaries of this, and there's something so special about going into people's homes and letting them tell the story of their music,
Right.
and then actually getting to hear it. Early on, well-meaning people would say, don't you hope one day to be successful enough to have a print publication? And it
Right.
made sense at the time, but really with this kind of work especially, I could describe it for you using flowery metaphor about food and color and all that, but really you need to hear it. And
Right.
that's something really special. So that the work has been really great in that way.
So I'm hearing them tune behind
am
me.
too.
And I need to get on stage to perform with this ensemble. So I'm going to leave you
Okay.
on the desk right now to lead us into Terry Riley's In C. All right?
It was a pleasure.
Okay.
I feel a little bit like you're leaving me the bridge in a Star Trek episode. This is a little bit dangerous.
Oh, actually, I'm giving the signal not to leave just yet. We're not leaving just yet. I actually have a little bit more time as the audience is talking in, so we'll continue talking.
Okay, let's do it.
And so you're mentioning John Luther Adams and your work with him as well. And John Luther Adams is a big friend of the festival.
Yes. He's been very supportive of his work through the
Right.
years.
CeeLo was performed here. Last year, Everything That Rises was performed here by Jack Quartet. And
The Jack is a big,
Right.
all the string quartets that they do and performances, the work. So there's a lot of interconnection there.
oh, and now I am getting the signal to leave? Okay, so I am going to leave right now and go to the stage for Terry Riley's NC. Take us away.
Thank you. Actually, this is a very good setup for NC because you kind of have to follow what your neighbor is doing, listening very closely. As Thomas was explaining earlier, it's 53 cells of music, and you're listening and you're repeating against a pulse. And the piece changes every time you hear it. So you might one time have a particular group of performers playing a particular group of instruments, and then the next time it's something very, very different. So I'm super looking forward to this performance. The last time I heard it was at Carnegie Hall in 2009. This time I hear we're going to have to do a little bit of star spotting. We know Steve and Thomas from the desk are going to be performing, as is Tom Morris, who is runs a festival. So definitely sit out in the virtual or the real audience and see who you can spot throughout the show. I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I've enjoyed my time here so much. It's my first time at Ojai, so I feel like this was definitely a great way to kick it off. So we're really looking forward to the show that's coming up, and I will turn it over to that.